And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC meeting. Today's date is Wednesday, July 15th. I've just copied and pasted the meeting notes doc that we'll be going over. And it's also generated in issue number 178 in the NPM RFCs repo. As per usual, quick housekeeping, all these calls and all communication that we have in the RFCs repo is governed under a code of conduct. Just be mindful and allow people to speak. We just ask that you raise your hand if there's discussions happening, and I'll call on you to speak. As well, the point of this meeting is ideally for us to be moving forward, proposals by the community, and hoping to have another channel for us to have discussions and hopefully move things forward together. So again, before we jump in, is there any announcements that anybody had or want to share? If not, is there anything that isn't on the agenda right now that someone would like to add? If not, I know that Roy had helped clean this up a bit, so I just wanted to quickly say thank you, Roy, for helping create the agenda today. And so let's dive into the first issue, 160, which is the poll for preference on how to filter workspaces. So again, this is a poll that Roy spun up to essentially dig in and have some discussion around the filtering mechanism and sort of design as proposed. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 options there. Roy, did you want to give a quick update on that?
Yeah, this one is just more of a reminder for people to go and vote there. So yeah, I kind of removed the running command itself from today's agenda. So I think we're going to be going over that and probably take a look at the results of the poll next week.
So I had some comments on this poll. I think it basically, the poll is essentially getting at sort of 3 different or 2 different questions, and then there's kind of 3 main options here. If we do it with -- workspace equals foo, that means it's a config value, and we can add -w as an alias for that, trivially. If we want it to be npm workspace foo test, then it's a separate command, and in that case, again, like adding an alias to ws or w is totally trivial. The fundamental question then, if we're going to do something cute like npm:/foo blah blah blah, we're introducing a new style of sort of setting a config or setting a separate command, which that's the one that's kind of the costliest to implement, and I'd strongly push back on that, even though it is neat, and I think it is very, very cute. I like it, but having to actually build it and implement it, I'm like, oh, that looks like work. The fundamental question then, like if we throw that one out, if we throw out the hard one, the real question is the definition of which workspace you're filtering in, or which workspace you're working in, is that a configuration or is that a wholly separate command? I posted some questions that I think kind of help drive toward an answer there. In that RFC discussion, or in issue 160. So I'd encourage. I know I see Jordan actually went and
followed up.
It's always quick on the draw. Went and posted some answers there, and I started out writing that comment in the mindset that like npm workspace should be a top level command which defines which workspace you're working in. Because running tests in a given workspace is kind of a different sort of thing in some ways than running tests at the root of the repo. But by the end of kind of outlining these questions, I'm and the more I think about it, the more I kind of come over to the other side where it actually is a config. And if we want to have a top level workspace command, it should be something to like manage my workspaces, not just run scripts in them or define which workspace I'm working in. You know, I might want to have a command like npm workspace add foo, and that shouldn't try to run npm foo in the workspace named add. It should add a new workspace called foo. So,
right.
And that if we're going to do that and we're going to kind of reserve that top level command to do workspace management, then it doesn't make any sense at all to have it be the thing that defines what workspace you're working in. In that case, we might want to have, you know, npm workspace run something that takes a workspace config and runs something, or just get rid, not have that command and be npm run -- workspace equals foo. So yeah, I'm leaning pretty strongly now towards it being a config, but you know, I'm always holding these things loosely.
Could we make it be a config but not have it available in the resulting command? Like, one of the things I typed in my comment is I think it would be really weird if a sub package, right? Like I guess is that a workspace, or is the whole thing a workspace?
A workspace is a thing like the thing that lives at packages / foo. That is.
So what is the whole repo called? Project?
A project.
Project.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it would be really weird for me if a workspace ran something different, or was able to do something different when its script was invoked from the project level versus when I CD'd into the workspace and ran the same script. They should be forced to be identical. Is that something we can ensure regardless of config or separate command?
It's well, it's easier to enforce if it's a separate command.
Okay.
But it's it would be a little bit of work because just by default, right? Anything that is not a default config value gets plunked into the environment.
But you have another RFC that's probably changing that, right?
That's the, you know, in npm 7, according to that RFC. In npm 6, every config is dumped into the environment, regardless of whether it's a default or overridden.
Right.
So if we wanted to say, well, you know, the workspace should not have an npm config workspace environment variable, which actually could get a little confusing if it's going to run subcommands, right? So you might have like a post test script that runs npm run lint.
Sure.
So if you're doing npm run lint and it's being run in a workspace, then that environment variable is going to be contagious. So you're effectively going to be running npm run lint -- workspace equals, you know, blurg. So it's going to have to know kind of what is it's basically going to have to not update the prefix and make sure it only updates the workspace.
Well,
if it updates,
why does it need to pass that along? Because can't it just like set the working directory to the workspace and run the command in it, as if I had CD'd into it and typed npm run lint?
Yes. So I guess what I'm saying is like there's two possible approaches here. One is the way that you're suggesting, which adds, you know, not a large amount of work, but a thing that we have to make sure we don't forget, amount of work to never include the workspace config in a package script. The other approach is we just set the prefix and the you know, the folder prefix and the working directory. Or sorry. The other option is we don't change the working directory and the prefix. I don't know, that might actually be harder. Yeah, I mean I think you bring up a good point. We probably should make sure that we never include that in the environment. And that actually gets us around one of the issues I brought up, where like, would you ever want to run, you know, have your your app workspace that kicks off tests in the core workspace. If you have it in the environment, it's going to be kind of tricky to do that. So, but if we just don't have it in the environment, like, all right, well, then that's not a problem.
Well, and that's also a feature that could be added later. So the first thing is, I think that the current working directory needs to be the workspace for each project, or for each
or the test won't
command,
work. Yeah,
or the command won't work right. Yeah. So, like, it seems like a possible feature to add later, to have where you can run within a workspace. You could invoke a command that tells npm look up to the project, and then invoke in a different workspace. Like, maybe, but that seems like something that could be added regardless of this question. And you'd still want to run it from the working directory of the workspace.
Right. So the
like npm test -- like hoist to project or something.
Sure. So the other, if you did that now, if you have your app workspace that runs npm -- workspace equals core test. If you do that, it's going to look for a, with the implementation we're kind of contemplating here, it would look for a nested workspace underneath that. It'll look for a workspace at like apps/core/
Yeah, that's why you'd need to either cd up or use some other flag to tell npm to do that for you, is what I'm envisioning. Yeah.
Or we would just have to, not set the prefix config and be able to know, like, okay, it's a workspace that's calling this, so I need to go back up to my prefix and then do it. And that just, having that as a default feels really surprising to me. So I think I'm coming around to like somewhat emphatic agreement with you, but yeah, we do need to not put the workspace value in the run script environment.
Okay. So I guess there's a few other questions here that you brought up though, Isaac, that I think we should give some folks some time to go over and give feedback on. And as you noted, I guess, Roy, you want to keep this open for another week and sort of summarize the discussion next week, I guess. Okay, sounds good. So moving on, unless anybody else had anything else they wanted to top up there. Nope. Okay, moving on. So number 2 here, RC 150. So add file pack dependency protocol. I'm not sure, David, if anybody's updated this, but if you want to go back and maybe give us another update about this RC.
Well, I don't know of updates. I don't think we had much discussion in the ticket, in the issue itself. But I actually reviewed the last meeting that you guys had about the file pack. Of course, I agree that not having a protocol will be better. It will be easier to maintain. It will be more compatible with other versions. But I think the main purpose still stands, which is having the dependency not only sym-linked, but installed as it will be a production package that you're fetching from the registry. And we are still missing how will we do the building steps if there is any that needs to be run. Should this be done with a prepared script or something like that? So I don't know if we should follow the discussion on that regard.
Yeah. So where I'd kind of like to go, and I think where we landed in the discussion, I apologize, I did not go and update this ticket as I had planned.
No problem.
But yeah, essentially it would be nice to be able to say, I want to install a file dep, but I want it to be packed and unpacked rather than sym-linked. That being said, then the open question for me is, should this be at like a dependency level, where you say, I want this file to be packed and unpacked, but I want this other file to be a symlink? Or is it more at a project level where I say, in this particular environment where I'm in right now, I'm running this command. I want you to install all my file deps as symlinks, or I want you to install all my file deps as, packed and unpacked tarballs. I can see the arguments for either one, but again, for me, it's kind of like if it's more of a project level thing or an environment level thing, then it should just be a config value, right? There should just be like a, npm -- file deps are symlinks equals false or something. Or, even something you can put in a .npmrc file or in the environment in your build configuration or what have you. If it's really you really need the granularity of being per dependency, and you want to make it consistent across all environments and all uses, then using a protocol might be a better approach, or at least something that's in the saved in the lock file to say this one is packed and unpacked. It's not a symlink.
Yeah, so what I was thinking about was the last option that you shared. I would like it to be consistent. So whenever I'm installing this package, I know that I'm linking this package to another. So maybe an application or some other library. I want it to be built or installed with this dev dependency, so it can then be built to have some distributables, and then I want to link it back to the parent or the consuming library.
I see. So you might want to have it linked most of the time, and then run a build that actually packs and unpacks it.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be able to kind of switch between uses. Yeah, I mean that's going to be a lot harder if you have to go in and change the dependency in your package JSON to use a different protocol, right?
Yep, I agree.
So that seems to me like this is a good idea for a feature for a config value. It does require some changes in Arborist, but I don't think they'd be super, super hard. We just have to kind of be more flexible and say, if something effectively came from a tarball that was packed from that file location, then we treat it as valid, right? So right now, if you list something as a file dependency, then if Arborist sees something other than a symlink there, it's going to say, no, this is wrong, right? This is invalid. So we would just have to be a little more cognizant, because what you don't want to do is like, I run the install with my, symlinks as packs config value, and then I run npm-ls and it yells at me because my symlinks are real folders rather than packed. But again, it's not particularly challenging to do as a. It's not hard to figure out how to do in either way, but doing it as a config value touches way fewer repos. It's like there's an update to npm CLI and an update to npm CLI/arborist, and that's it.
Okay, in that case, if we are adding a configuration, I don't know if it's in package.json or in the npm-rc, will this configuration be read by the install? I don't know if it's Arborist the one doing that, or who is the responsibility to do that. But if I'm, for instance, installing a package which has some dev dependencies that are required for being built, who is going to be doing this install before doing the package?
Oh, so yeah, Arborist already handles that for some other cases. So if you install from a Git dependency today, we actually do check it out into a temporary folder, run all the prepare scripts, bundle it up into a tarball, and then unpack that tarball.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, we have for a couple of years. It's required for like installing Git deps that have, Babel scripts or CoffeeScript or whatever else build stuff. So yeah, doing that for file deps, not particularly challenging. I mean, we've got kind of the code already there to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know about the Git dependencies doing that. So it's really just reusing kind of the same logic just for the file depths. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, actually, there's some logic in Arborist today to say, you know, if it's a file dep, then create a symlink. Otherwise, do the like whatever we have to do to unpack into this folder. So essentially, what we do is just like, if that config flag is set, then don't do that switch, and that's the whole implementation. The trickier part is in reading the tree later and saying, and how we save it and how we, you know, keep ourselves from thinking that it's something invalid. But actually doing it is already there. And actually we also have to do that for npm publish, right? So that's also where that code exists to do a similar kind of thing. Because when you're publishing, you're packing a directory and you're doing all of that junk. So yeah, implementation wise, like we have the code, we just kind of have to direct our flow to it.
Isaac, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So today, if someone tries to point, you know, to a local Git repo and just use the Git protocol, like they could actually essentially get it already?
Yes, it would be slower and less efficient. But you could do something like Git. Oh God, how would you do that?
Git with a directory, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we support Git plus file though.
Oh, right.
Right, so we would have to add, and maybe we should add, that would be easy to add, but yeah, I think what you might have to actually do to do that today is start a Git daemon and then do like Git plus HTTP : //localhost, you know, whatever. That's pretty onerous. And now you're like,
oh no, I just looking at the docs, it seems like we have Git plus file.
then forget what I just said. Yeah, I guess you could probably do this with like git plus file, you know, path to repo /.git.
Maybe worth a try, David, for this.
Yeah, definitely. We'll try that, and I think that you also can specify a path for the folder where you want to fetch the package.json from, or not?
No, we don't support that yet. We've talked about it, but I think there's an Open RFC for it.
Okay.
We haven't discussed it much in meetings because it's pretty much there might not be an Open RFC. It might just be an issue comment I'm remembering, but there's definitely, the idea has been tossed around, and again, it's one of these things that's a change to the dependency specifier, which is always just like tremendously costly because we have to update like a million different things to support it.
So just to circle back on this actual RFC, then what would the changes need to be for us to probably consider, let's say, a flag to be passed through or config passed through to npm pack and publish? Is that sort of the recommendation here? Is that how we would actually implement this?
Bit to npm install, right? The config. To treat files as a...
The treat files, right, yeah. So it'd be a config that affects all three. I guess pass through to pack and publish. So is that the change or the recommendation here, is to maybe modify this RFC from being a protocol to config?
Yes, I'm gonna post I've got a comment. I've been keeping some notes of what we've been saying here.
Okay.
Just to make sure we kind of get the main issues, and yeah, should be pretty straightforward.
Sounds good. Okay, so hopefully we can modify that a bit based on that conversation, and we can look at the updates if you got some time, David, to rework that based on Isaac's feedback here. So,
yep.
Cool. Moving along then. So the third item on the agenda today, maybe quickly, if you can, Isaac, speak to the overrides RFC. I'm not sure why this was still open. Oh, you had an update here, I guess.
Yeah, so I just had to reply to some of the comments still pending. Essentially, I think that we're going to stick with dot instead of the @ sign or something else, or specifying a whole package JSON manifest nested. Even though I think @ is a more intuitive and kind of cuter name for that field. The node.js exports field and the what working groups, or actually I don't know what group manages it now, but the browser's import map specification or proposal also uses dot to mean that. So it's sort of like, and that's kind of got like symmetrical semantics to what we mean in this case for overrides. So it just makes the most sense to use it. And yeah, it's going to come after 7.0.
So one thing, I'm not super familiar with this proposal, but there is a new feature that's landing in the next version of Node for package imports, which allows you to override your imports internally in your own package, not from an external interface. And I believe that we went forward with using the hash symbol for that. So just a heads up.
Interesting. Is that because of like Anchor, like relative?
JavaScript private fields.
Okay,
so,
well.
Yeah, the purpose of that is so that you can take like a specifier that's internal only to your package, not external, and then specify like an entry point that's specific to the runtime. So that could allow you to like override built-ins, override internals. My understanding, for what it's worth, from the import maps proposal, it's generic. So it's just like left hand maps to right hand, and you do scopes on a per package basis. So it's not based on any particular symbol to drive that. It's just like, it just works. But the symbol that Node went with right now is that hashtag. Now, for what it's worth, it's still on the experimental modules interface. So like, if we have feedback about that and are concerned, that's always something that we could go for. I actually am actively working, definitely not during this meeting, on the 14.6.0 release, which includes that change. So it hasn't even gone out yet. It is like about as fresh as it comes. It's like releasing later today or tomorrow, most likely tomorrow.
So that's good to know. Does that change then, like how we want to implement this?
Not really.
No.
I mean, it's somewhat different from import maps, I guess, or it's somewhat different from the overrides of the require overrides.
Yeah, I guess what I could do is, I'm just not familiar with this proposal. So let me give a review of the proposal. And if I think that there's anything concerning or anything to flag, I'll comment on the proposal.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Okay. Did anybody else have any feedback or want to top up there? Okay. Moving on to RFC number 96, add publish confirmation prompt. Roy, I think that you had added this. Is there any update here?
Yeah, I added it back to see if we can just, I think we should probably just approve it, right? Ratify it and get it queued up for 7.0 if we really want to do it before 7.0.
Yeah, I have no personal like qualms over how this is like queued up.
Yeah, maybe just a quick refresh. It's just about adding an extra confirmation, extra prompt during publish time. And
yeah, it's a breaking change, so we need it. It's kind of now or never.
No. Actually, what we set up when we landed last time, we discussed it, and what the RFC is describing right now is that it's going to be an opt-in flag.
Okay.
Yeah. So for npm 7, it will be opt-in, and then we could eventually make the change in npm 8.
Yeah, if it's opt-in, then I think it can be whenever. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to agree to nothing new for 7.0.
Yeah. So maybe it could be
trying to get it shipped.
Yeah, maybe we could just verify and say it's for 7.1 or
7.x.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes along with 2 flags then. You have to opt into the publication confirmation, so we have to carry along that. Does that flag just become meaningless at some point once it is turned on by default, Roy?
No, the flag is still meaningful because you might have it turned off in a global config or something.
True.
Right.
Or,
Okay, that makes
turned
sense.
on per project and then turned off in the environment. Like, that's how config flags work. They get flipped around. Cool. But yeah, we can flip the default in 8.0 if there's a lot of feedback that it's positive, right? If everybody hates it, then we remove it in 8.0 and
there
you go.
Cool.
If it's mixed, we leave it as opt-in.
Okay, so then Roy, are you gonna do the work to update? You're gonna have to update, I think, the file name
Sure.
and then get it merged in.
Yeah. All right.
Moving on to RFC 126, and Orta, I think you were able to join. Adding types information to package JSON in the registry. Not sure if there's been any movement on this or any updates.
Yeah, neither. It's totally in a waiting on NPM to do the work situation at this point. I can't even do the work, so I'd love to give me access through Microsoft.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, you can just ping me if anybody has opinions in there.
So we discussed this we touched on this very briefly last week. I think where I'm at with it is, and I don't want to be in this situation where we're kind of deadlocked on each other. So if somebody needs to kind of break the logjam, we certainly can. But I think where I'm at is like I don't feel confident just implementing something or just sort of blessing a field because I'm not really like involved with TypeScript or Flow or any of these other ones to feel like it's my place to kind of make that call. But what would be really helpful, I think, is just to give us like what is the field and like what's the most useful thing that we could possibly do with it, and then let's try and figure out how to implement that. I really don't have strong feelings about what gets included, and it's mostly if there's a field that people are currently putting in package JSON to do this, like great, then it probably already mostly works. We just got to add it to the Corgi docs so that we can start hooking more features on it.
Yeah, so essentially, go ahead, Orta. Yeah.
No, go for it. I'll hear you first.
Yeah, so essentially just ratifying this and then queuing up the work on the registry side is kind of the next steps. Then if we're saying this is already how the TypeScript community is defining this in package JSON, and essentially we're just providing this metadata like to be used, right? Like, so.
Yeah, if it's just like take this field and put it in the Corgi docs, like I can do that in an afternoon. That's not hard.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can write an extra issue, comment in the issue that just summarizes that if you'd like.
That'd be wonderful.
And in terms of like who's gonna take the reins and actually do the implementation, that's where I think it's good. We have actually Ad Thompson, who is joining very late into the day, I'm sure, on his side of the pond. So in terms of actually queuing up this type of like addition, I know that we potentially can make these changes really quickly. Like our team can do that. Like, is this something that we should be putting on these types of additions is something that we should be putting on the backlog of the registry team?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm sorry, I meant to read the RFC and I got stuck on something else. What?
You can TLDR it for you if you want.
So yes, that'd be great. My understanding is that we're just adding type information into the package JSON. What is the expectation out of the registry?
So the rough gist is a lot like the way that we have index as an optional, or is it main? I think it's main as an optional field in the package.json that redirects where you go to find your root JavaScript file. The same concept exists for types in TypeScript, and the Flow team are open to having a similar thing if it means getting it in here. The thing is, because it's like optional, it means that you cannot know whether a package from information in the registry has types or not, which effectively means you can't say on like the npm.com page that this has types, because the field for doing that is optional. So the idea here is that there is a new field in the registry that basically runs the sort of resolvers that would be used by Flow and TypeScript, and puts the result of those resolvers into a sort of reserved field effectively, or it could go into the same ones. But I don't know whether you feel like overwriting is up for debate. I put it as its own field that's just underscored and it's reserved to you.
So I would
that's the rough idea that like
in order to increase the chances that and shorten the time frame before you get what you're asking for, this work should be done at publish time, I think, because we can do that now, right? We can do that in npm 7. We could even do that in a 6 minor release if we really felt so inclined. Then the next step could be that we run if we decide it's worth it, we run a script that will go and apply that to all the past published tarballs. Or we could just not do that backlog process and instead just say, okay, all publishes moving forward with this version of npm and up will include this metadata. And I think that would actually, that would get you what you need with much less sort of wailing and gnashing of teeth.
That was my first attempt at this, and it was only when I went over to try and build it into Yarn that they were like, some of these things are like the field that I was trying to add was the underscore version of it. But I can just make it do the TypeScript one, but then then I'm doing the TypeScript only one. Like the goal of this was to make sure that it was generic and in a way that any other type system, because even since I started, there is a new TypeScript. There is a new type system called Hegel that has been built since then. And in theory, maybe you want to support them because maybe TypeScript isn't as dominant as it is today, which puts it on that's a registry concern. But I thought of it originally as a client, just going in and just resolve this thing, attach it to the package JSON before it goes up.
Yeah. So we have a module called on GitHub at npm/read package JSON. That would be kind of the place to put that extra metadata. It already does stuff like figure out if you're in a Git repo and read your README file to see a default description and do a bunch of other kind of slow niceties, which you don't want all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally do it client side. That's a win for me just as much.
Cool.
I'll put it in there.
Yeah.
I'll update the issue.
In terms of also us having that though in the registry, there's probably some interesting things that we could do on the website, right? So
yeah,
I've been asked many times if we can add type information to package pages, and I'm sure Ed is now hearing that same messaging. So
yeah, if this is in, then you can make a general assumption that if the types field is in the package JSON, then it's there, full stop.
That it has
and this will
types.
put it in inferred, that it has types. Yeah. And I'll do the same for Flow, so you can also decide whether you want to include that or not. But that's there.
Okay. So then you're actually going to do the work to add it to read package JSON and open up a PR there, I guess, then, Orta?
Yeah, and I'll link it over to the RFC.
Okay. But we're still going to need to add it to that
so we're still going
to the Corgi docs.
Yeah, but adding it to the last 4 or 5 Corgi doc updates I did, so I don't I mean, I think
Okay.
I almost own that that repo now. So yeah, I don't see that as a very large blocker.
Sure.
Cool.
Okay. So you're going to add a note here, I guess, tack on to the RC order about, okay, the client approach, I guess, which, okay. Because I think that we can actually like ratify this as soon as that's up. Cool. So moving on to RFC 165, parent package JSON.
Yeah, I saw this and I first thought, wow, this is a great idea. And then I thought, oh no, this is going to be so hard to do.
So, oh, sorry, I was trying to paste the actual RFC itself for folks that haven't seen it yet. And I apologize, I haven't looked at this quite yet.
Is Christian 24
Not
able to join us? Okay. So I have read through this. The teal deer here is you can add an extends field in your package JSON, and that can define a package.json that it inherits fields from, and then it just sort of overrides whatever is there. Couple of pretty big issues in the RFC as written, which I think we could probably carve down and make it more reasonable. But one of them is that it contemplates using a name or URL or a version of the parent package to use. So the you could have like a extends express at 10.x.
Yeah.
And so where that gets kind of challenging is
What happens if it's deprecated?
What happens if it's deprecated? What happens if they just publish a new version that moves something or changes its dependencies, right? So your package JSON is no longer deterministic. The other problem, like if we could somehow say, okay, it has to be a specific version, it can't be assembler range. There's still like, let's say I install 2,000 deps in my app, which is not like an unusual number of deps to install. If every one of those is extending a package JSON from another thing, like now I actually have to do 2 lookups that can't be parallelized, right? I have to do 2 serial lookups for each one to get its manifest.
Sure.
Now we could somewhat get around that by making the publish time, sort of lock that down. So when you publish it, it just sort of snapshots it. It says, this is this thing at the state now, this is how we're publishing it.
Which might be good for workspaces like our monorepo situation where you just want to extend from the parent, right?
Right. So then even if we do lock down the manifest as it lives on the registry, what gets dumped in your package.json file, or what gets dumped into your node modules folder, is still whatever's in the tarball. So if each one of those things is extending something that's a reach out across the network, then we have this situation where running npm ls has to make 1,000 HTTP requests, and that could be pretty onerous. Yeah, one thing I was thinking about was, or we have to go back to the kind of bad old days of mutating the package.json as it goes into the tarball or as it comes out of the tarball. One thing that I was thinking that might make it a little more manageable is to say that you can only extend a package JSON with a file path. So, I can have a workspace that extends a different, like a sibling workspace or the root project, or just some other arbitrary file somewhere on my system. And in that case, then we do sort of snapshot the current state when we do a publish, and that's what goes in the tarball. And when somebody installs that package, they just don't have to worry about any extend stuff. So initial impressions.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to dig into the details there. I'm not sure if anybody else has any feedback.
Yeah, I also haven't dug into the Maven and Gradle usage of extending extending project metadata.
Is it referenced as if they do that at install time? They actually do that serial lookup, like you're saying, like.
Well, there's two links under prior R. I just haven't gone through and read them, so I'm not sure what they how well they might address or kind of explore some of these problems.
Okay, sounds like we'll give this some time to have other folks jump in then. Unless anybody else had anything to add, we can move on to the last item. So RC, this is number 114. So expand list of ignored files. Roy, did you want to give a quick update on this? And I know Jordan's also added some comments here.
Yeah, I brought that one back to see if we can get some feedback from the community on files. Anyone think that might be worth changing? Because I couldn't really come up with anything else after we last talked about this. So really reaching out to the community for help, I guess. The idea was to just, if we want to expand, to really only add files that can really be harmful, right? Like leaking secrets, that kind of stuff, right?
I mean, I think I don't know if I plus one this. No, it was actually Jordan. So Wes gave the feedback for .m files. I mean, it's probably the most relevant to be added to this, right?
I mean,
so it's from a while back, yeah.
I think that if the goal is to prevent things from leaking, file names aren't the solution. The only time I've ever leaked things I didn't want to leak was when I had accidentally, or when I had intentionally dumped the output of env into two different files so I could diff them. And I forgot to delete the two files before I did npm publish. So I had a bunch of credentials that ended up getting blasted out, which luckily were all caught quickly and nothing happened. But like the real check is like all the server side things that GitHub and npm do to look for credentials. Like there's probably a subset of those that you could apply to look for credential-like things without actually knowing for sure if it's a real credential that would actually be useful if applied to all files, not just to specific file names. Because no file name would have caught my arbitrary like before and after file names.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Then we could, like, similar to the publish confirmation we just discussed, right? We could force the publish confirmation and like put some warnings before, like, okay, this looks like a token, like look like a secret. Are you sure you want to publish? That sounds like a good idea.
And that would have saved me that one time. And you know.
Yeah, it's one of those like cheap to just be told about it, but it would be so expensive if it sneaked through.
Right. I mean, you could even look for all end variable like names and values, or values in particular. You just be like, parse out all the current environment variable values. Are any of them in the going to show up in the tarball? Like, ask me to double check. Right.
Yeah. I think again with the publish prompt confirmation, like it's probably going to rely on that same config, right? Otherwise, it might break some CI somewhere, and people might be unhappy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to only, any prompt you have to only issue when it's a TTY, right? Like that's unavoidable. So like, also, if it's not a TTY, you can hard fail, but that's your only option. And if you want to do that and then provide a environment variable or command line arg, or config or whatever bypass of the hard fail, like that's fine too.
Yeah,
But in the human case, at the very least, when it's a TTY, you can provide a prompt for whatever it can and should, I would say, provide a prompt for anything that would be useful. Like, individually, some of them might end up being annoying and you might want a config bypass, but that's like, that's tomorrow's problem.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, but it may be a different RFC though.
Totally. Yeah, I guess I'm not volunteering to write that one. I already have 2 or 3 RFCs I've volunteered to write that I haven't done yet. But like what I mean is if the goal of your RFC here is to prevent leaks, I don't, other than .m files, maybe, I don't know how much it's actually going to achieve that. I think it's more likely to make like package sizes smaller, which is good. People like that, but like that's about it. I think if your goal is best served, I think, by a different RFC.
No, yeah, and to be honest, I think that this RFC started with that idea in mind, and then it kind of pivoted with the discussions we had here. But no, I can volunteer to write a new one for tokens, like printing warnings, and yeah, can follow up with that.
To the point of the current RFC, I in the Zoom chat put in the node gitignore that GitHub maintains in the gitignore repo and said github/gitignore. This does seem to be relatively aggressively maintained. Like there's like snowpack stuff in here. Like that's much newer than I expected. So, you know, maybe there's some things in here that we'd want to add to this or merge. Like, I don't know if you'd want to, you know, basically just hold whatever additional things NPM does on top, like outside of what this
that includes
does,
a folder called dist. Tierney, and I'm only halfway down, and that would break like a large number of NPM packages. So I think the bulk of the contents are useful, but I don't think any automatic merging is likely. With just because of that. That seems to be the only one in that file that would break it. But you know, the other thing is the star.tgz. Anybody who has a tarball intentionally in their package, which I think Lodash played with at one point, would also break. But I think the majority of things in there is like useful to block. So like, you know, I like the direction.
But yeah, that's just one thing I'd potentially worth doing or looking at. So
yeah, I think the concern with like going forward with any net new ignore is just like the false safety that people would have downloading packages that would have like historically already been packaged with the previous, you know, set of rules. And truly, if we're concerned about, you know, package size and security, then I think maybe the warnings and the approach that we're speaking to, that in a net new RFC that would take the, you know, the similar approach to the publish like prompt would maybe be more impactful and more useful, and it'd be less, there'd be like less of a hazard in again, like the ecosystem's already been packing up packages with potentially like ESLint files and .m files, right? So
yeah, and I guess I would definitely like echo what Jordan said and assert that like I wouldn't look at this RFC as a security feature, but more of a like limiting the ecosystem in a way that's enabling them to fall into a pit of success. So like, I mean, I know I've certainly published things that I didn't mean to, like accidentally over-published or, you know, stuff like that. And I think that this is more in line with that and just good hygiene rather than security. And so, yeah, I would agree that if you're looking at it from security, absolutely agree with that. But I do think that there's still definitely a path for, you know, package hygiene here.
For sure, but it's just like the approach is, are we prescriptive or are we like, you know, like how are we enforcing the hygiene, right? So like with file ignoring, we're essentially like expanding that list would be, you know, being super prescriptive versus just warning.
I guess, yeah, and I guess how I would look at that is, you know, do you ever really want to publish your TS build info? And that, yeah, like there are things there that I think you generally probably do not want to publish, and that's what you should be targeting. You shouldn't like necessarily be targeting everything at once. Especially since, like, you know, a git ignore compared to npm publish or npm ignore is, you know, one is mutable, one is immutable. one is easily fixed. Yeah, so I think that this is a good approach, but yeah, I would agree that being conservative in that way is smart. But I do think that like moving forward with the ecosystem in that direction is probably a good step.
Just to be mindful of time here, we are about 1 minute over. In terms of this RFC specifically, do we want to keep you on the books for another week then, Roy, and potentially backlog a ticket to create a separate RFC for what sounds like an opportunity to create another flag there?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think this was good. This is a good outcome from just putting this back in the agenda. I can definitely follow up with creating a different one for identified tokens, different one. And I think all of them would, I think we also had a discussion about just warning instead of failing when trying to include these files. So they might all end up being like warnings during publish time that people might only be able to see if they're using the new flag for confirm the publish, right? Like that other RFC. So they might kind of like all be wrapped together.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Awesome. So appreciate everybody jumping on again today, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Ciao.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.